Premier League, Tottenham have had a 2-goal lead and then gone on to lose the match 10 times. Actually, no, scratch that, make that 11. After the lead they held against Chelsea in a London derby, only for Cole Palmer to Panenka them to a 4-3 defeat. And it carries on a one-word trend that has defined this club over the last 15 years. Spursy. A word that means everything and means nothing. It means bottling positions of success, silverware, and overall happiness and enjoyment for their supporters. Tottenham are Champions League regulars, but haven't won a piece of silverware since 2008. But why? Why are Spurs so Spursy? Are you a Tottenham fan and it wasn't your fault? Tired of beating Manchester City at home only to lose to Ipswich the next week? Fed up of Fraser Forster being a terrorist whenever called upon? Well, you ladies and gentlemen should try croquet. A much less interesting sport, but one that won't hurt you like football does. Get free mental health if you sign up with the code FNG. We'll go again next season, lads. It's fine. Look, we're in what, December? There's already been too much Spursiness going on for Tottenham, I'm afraid. I say this season because that's where we'll start. This has been a very weird season overall for the Premier League's big clubs, and also for Tottenham as well. It doesn't seem like anybody wants to win the league, and in the case of Tottenham, it doesn't even really seem like they fancy a trip to Europe either. There's never 48 hours as a Tottenham fan where you actually get to experience pure happiness, because you'll win in the League Cup against Man City, then slap Aston Villa 4-1, before losing to Galatasaray, Ipswich, beating Man City 4-0, then losing to Bournemouth and drawing to a 10-man Fulham. It's legitimately as if they decide all of their results based on a spin wheel that you find on a Flash website made in 2009. Their whole campaign has been decided by my maths, bro. It's insane. How do you lose? No offense to Ipswich, because they've actually been pretty good, better than I think some people would have expected. But how do you lose to Ipswich after beating Man City 4-0? To be fair, most people could beat Man City 4-0 at the moment. Let's be honest, Tottenham fans are constantly looking over their shoulders for the next absolute catastrophe that's going to hit their football club. Let's be honest, the players have got to be getting fed up at this point. Heung-min Son spent his entire prime alongside Ben Davies. That shouldn't be allowed. That should be punishable as a crime, money laundering or something. We've got to take him down for some sort of shit. And he'll be taking matters into his own hands when he comes across Daniel Levy's hairless head in the next board of directors meeting. If you think Heung-min Son's cursed, just think about poor Harold Kane. He doesn't even play for these lot anymore, and the guy still can't buy a piece of silverware. He'll be devastated finding out he's still cursed 2 years after he left the club when FC Heidenheim win the Bundesliga instead of him. He could go to Scotland and sign for Celtic, and Kilmarnock would turn into superhuman alien agents and win the league on goal difference. But obviously, you guys know it's much more than this season. It's not just a situation of Tottenham underperforming now and a phrase being coined. Because in reality, you could say, what do we think of Tottenham? The answer is shit, and Spurs don't have that much to say in response. It could be described even historically. Paul Gascoigne getting injured 15 minutes into an FA Cup final back in 1991. Sir Alex Ferguson trying to get a comeback out of a United squad at half-time by literally saying, lads, it's Tottenham, as a 3-word response, and it actually working. Frank Lampard and his Chelsea side used to laugh and joke about the fact they'd go to Tottenham and batter them every single time.
We used to beat them a lot. I think we lost once.
We all did.
We all beat them. Cue the Tottenham fans. They called it 3-point lane rather than White Hart Lane.
In the 2005-06 season, on the breakthrough, the precipice of Champions League football for the first time in years, all they need to do was match Arsenal's result when they played against Wigan, only for 10 players in the team to come down with food poisoning and for them to lose 2-1, missing out on a top 4 place. Just a few years after Arsenal won the league in their own stadium. The man who accidentally put that out-of-date lasagna in the microwave will be looking at what Spurs have become, realising he's to blame. In 2009, in April, Spurs were 2-0 up at half-time, again against Manchester United. A very good Manchester United side that had prime Wayne Rooney and Ronaldo in it. They lost 5-2 by conceding 5 goals in 22 minutes. And this was what Tottenham did. This was their DNA. Harry Redknapp, who took the job in 2008, even said that it was a psychological issue. They'd go down 1-0 and end up losing the game 3-0, according to his assistant at the time. It was something they actively looked at, recognised, and tried to remedy because there was too much frailty within the mentality of the squad of players. And to be fair, Harry Redknapp managed to do a decent job of dispelling that a little bit. You know, they smashed through a glass ceiling of becoming Champions League regulars that they never really managed to achieve before. Yes, it was at a time where Arsenal was starting to struggle, Liverpool were terrible, it was pre-Manchester City money as well, but Tottenham had developed and built quite a good side over a spell of 5 years with serious goal scorers like Di Dimitar Berbatov, Robbie Keane, Jermaine Defoe and Darren Bent, alongside cultured signings like Luka Modric from Dinamo Zagreb. These are all players that have won a decent amount in their careers, especially Luka Modric, the most decorated player in Real Madrid history after leaving Spurs, which really does sum it all up completely. Then Mauricio Pochettino would arrive on the scene a few years later. Arguably the most successful Tottenham manager that they've probably had in recent times, because, I mean, well, you can't do that barometer by silverware, so you're going to have to do it by how close they came to, you know, significant silverware. And he did. They were in a title fight with Leicester and Arsenal up until a late capitulation in the early days of that managerial appointment, when some of that golden generation was still a lot younger, like Dele Alli and Harry Kane, and then they reached the final of the Champions League only to be defeated by Liverpool. But in both ways, they kind of lost in Spursy ways, you know, completely capitulating in the Battle of the Bridge against Chelsea, in a leading position only to completely lose their heads to astronomical proportions. Have you ever seen 11 men crash out at the same time? Kyle Walker using his head even less than he does right now, and in the Champions League giving away a penalty inside 2 minutes, and they felt like they were always chasing the game from that point onwards. After the Champions League final, things would capitulate quickly for Pochettino. He'd leave, then join Chelsea, and on his first return, batter his old side 4-1. This is what Tottenham do. So after that, in an attempt to add some ruthlessness, they went through managers like Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte, serial winners. But even that wouldn't work. They still couldn't get the best out of this young Spurs side, with Conte saying that the players don't enjoy playing under any kind of pressure. And if you can't play under pressure, you're not going to win anything. And that kinda brings us along to Ange Postecoglou, the Ange experience. He'd make a very quick start to life in the Premier League, grabbing 8 wins in his first 10 games as Spurs boss. Then they'd really struggle for results around about November time. He was asked about being Spursy in a press conference, saying that the tag was schoolboy stuff.
It's irrelevant, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter.
But then they concede 2 late goals to Wolves to lose 2-1 and blow leads against West Ham and Aston Villa, before providing one of the greatest comebacks I've seen in recent times to get back on level terms with Liverpool, only for Lucas Moura to give the ball straight to Diogo Jota so that he could restore our lead and we'd win 4-3. At the time, Gary Neville called it the most Tottenham thing to ever happen, and he was right. So why is this happening? Why has this been a consistent theme from 2008, and to be honest before, that was just the last time they won some silverware, up until now? I think the first thing is where Tottenham actually find themselves in the greater, like, scheme and pyramid of English football. Obviously, you know, when you're a side that's getting relegated and promoted from the Premier League, naturally you're going to win stuff at some point because you might win a playoff final, you might win a league. Unless you are just like Ipswich or Nottingham Forest at one point in the Championship. When you're a team that consistently stays in the Premier League as much as Tottenham, because there was a time where they were mid-table before they ended up in the Champions League and, you know, fighting for European trophies and stuff, you're not going to win anything. Like Everton are not, like, the chances of Everton winning something are so minimal because they don't get relegated to then win the Championship. They're not going to win domestic trophies because they're not as good as a significant portion of teams above them in the Premier League table. That's kind of where Spurs were at one point, right? And now they're pretty good, but they're still not as good as Man City or Liverpool on paper. Not as good as Arsenal or probably even Chelsea on paper. So then, you know, you expect them to win something like the Conference League or Europa League, but then again, the Spursy DNA enters once more. The way they exited the Conference League was a disaster back when they ended up in that for the first season of the competition itself. So then you look at the next reason, and I think, honestly, playing personnel through that entire time has to be a big reason as to why. Often, Tottenham have ended up with quite young squads, aside from the Redknapp squad that kind of got them into this conversation in the first place. They did have quite a lot of experience, like Ledley King and Jonathan Woodgate, like Robbie Keane, Jermaine Defoe, and then natural, you know, young, incredible ability like Gareth Bale and Luka Modric. Really, since then, especially you look at a side that was in the title fight where Leicester won the league, it was young and inexperienced. It definitely had the ability and should have won the league over Leicester, but there was that little bit of bottle DNA because these were kids, you know, so anytime anything did go wrong, there was a chance it could completely fall apart. That explains maybe falling apart a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily explain the chaos. That's where maybe managerial appointments come into play. I mean, Ange Postecoglou, his style lends itself to absolute carnage and goals because it is quite open, generally speaking. Any sane man goes 2 men down against Chelsea, doesn't make the halfway line, his back line as well. Poch was good, but inexperienced at the time. But then again, that sort of chaos in terms of managerial appointments, that doesn't explain the chaos that still happened when Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho were there. Jose was on the precipice of success in terms of at least a domestic cup, only to get sacked days before and for the job to be given to a man in Ryan Mason who quite literally did not have a CV. The man didn't even have time to make a cover letter before before the final was happening. And Antonio Conte, well, Conte experiments always blow up 2 to 3 seasons in. Give that man some of the players they had at the time, and he was always going to commit grievous bodily harm at some point. In reality, there's a pressure, a tag, an expectation that Tottenham will bottle things. It's not necessarily game by game, but as the season progresses, there's this feeling and this aura around the club that things will completely fall apart again. No matter when it is, whether it's at the start of the season, the middle of a season, or at the end, the business end of a season when they've got things to fight for. And I've mentioned a few reasons there, but maybe not even the most important one. The fact that you add all of that to an owner that should have been the victim of a political coup by now. Some of the recruitment that has happened in this football club has been like some of the worst business to ever happen on English soil. The way they reinvested the Gareth Bale money needs a panorama documentary investigation. It was a shocker. For Eric Lamela to be like the most successful player out of that group really tells you everything they need to know. After that, you've got what, Vincent Janssen and Clinton and G looking at each other as if they're meant to be the successors for goal-scoring capabilities. Federico Fazio could be tried for war crimes in London. Sadiq Khan should have had him extradited. I don't even know if he was the mayor of London at the time. Even if he wasn't, extradited. The guy had nothing to deliver as soon as a striker with above 63 pace ran in behind against Spurs.
What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to chase after them?
And this is where it does come down to, as I said, recruitment, or leadership and ownership. There's a reason why Spurs fans, a lot of them have been Levi out for a long time, and I completely get it. This is a club that is stuck in a cycle, kind of from top to bottom, really. And you never know, Ange Postecoglou might win them a cup this season. And I wouldn't even be surprised if after I made this video, they go and do that. Especially given some of their peers who have gone through difficult times. This era, I would say, for Tottenham, right, and this might be controversial, but from like 2009 to now, is not that dissimilar from Arsenal post-Wenger till about 2 years into the Arteta reign. There's really not that much difference, okay? These are two sides that are struggling with recruitment, that have had bottle jobs in games or in title races or during seasons. I mean, Arsenal falling apart in March became like a meme and an actual reality when they did it like 5 years on the bounce. There was all the Wenger out claims, there was terrible recruitment, awful players like Scalacci, David Luiz, Mustafi, Socrates. The fact that all centre-backs really tells you everything you need to know. Bottle jobs in individual games like being 4-0 up against Newcastle only to draw 4-4. The only difference was, what, a couple of FA Cups? Which sounds like a lot, and it is. Like, the fact that Arsenal won those cups does make them different to Spurs. But from a season-on-season perspective, in terms of just overall disappointments, there wasn't really that much difference. The difference is that Arsenal managed to bounce back, even though it's taken them a decent amount of time. Liverpool had a horrific banter era between 2009 and, apart from almost winning the league and even then completely bottling it with a Steven Gerrard slip, until about 2017. It's about how you bounce back from it. As eventually you have to get the recruitment right. Eventually the ownership changes, or there's a key shift in the personnel around the club. I don't really see personnel or board members changing much at Tottenham. It feels like there is just like an institution of bottling, of failure. But then again, are things actually as bad as they seem? Spurs actually are just kind of chaotic when you look into the stats. Yes, they lose a lot of points from winning positions, or they end up in situations at the end of a season where maybe they don't, achieve what they wanted to. But it also works the flip way round. Only Liverpool have earned more points from losing positions than Tottenham have since the 2015-16 season. In total, Spurs have earned 154 points after being behind in a game. So yes, they throw away leads on a regular basis, but they also end up bouncing back from behind in games, which shows strong positive mentality. They don't actually concede many late goals as far as the Premier League is concerned. Only the same amount as Chelsea in the last like 10 years, which would have them joint 11th in the table, not even in the top half of teams that crumble late on. And in terms of their stats this season, when you look at purely a goal scoring or conceding perspective, if you were to look at how many goals versus how many, they conceded in the league compared to everybody else, you'd probably guess they were third in the league rather than just about scraping into the top half. They've not conceded that many and they've scored quite a lot. It's just the fact that they lose by, minute details and then batter teams 5-0 like they did against Southampton. The reality is, Ange is not actually that far away from being fourth in the league. This is not a great league as things stand at the moment. You've got Man City falling apart. Villa and Newcastle have been a little bit disappointing. United started off very slowly. It's very condensed. 3 wins in a row for Spurs and they're in the Champions League spots. But what I would say is, right, why Spurs are so Spursy? Because you look at history and in terms of teams that have lost from winning positions, they're nowhere near the top. On a game-to-game basis, when you average everything out by how many games they played in the league, right? Because they're always going to have conceded, you know, they're always going to have higher stats than teams that haven't been, you know, in the Premier League for that long, because they've been ever present in the Premier League since 1992. The overall conclusion is they're just chaotic. Whether it is negative or positive, you can really just never predict what Tottenham are going to do next. And that has been encapsulated perfectly by how this season has gone. Tottenham needs some stability, probably a new owner, and recruitment that doesn't seem to just focus on chaos ballers. Even now, you've got Radu Dragusin, Richarlison, and Timo Werner who have entered the club, who you could probably predict were going to be pretty frustrating when they were signed. That's the aura they've given off throughout their careers, especially Timo Werner before he went to Tottenham. But in other aspects, it's been really good, like Mickey van der Veen, like Pap Sarr, and like Christian Romero, who are genuinely really quality finds. Not only are they chaotic, they've probably been a bit unlucky as well. The fact that they haven't won even a Carabao Cup in the last 15 years is criminal. But poor decision making at, you know, crucial times has been the reason for that, like sacking Jose Mourinho before a cup final. This is a man who literally wins silverware. That's all he does. But Spurs fans, I want to hear your opinions down in the comment section below, and how would you guys go about fixing the Spursy problem? I hope you've enjoyed this video though. Feel free to slap a like on it, and of course subscribe if you are new to the channel. If you want to support the channel even more, then you can become a member by clicking the join button down below. You get videos like these ones a little bit earlier, and also hopefully some exclusive content coming soon, as well as some other cool perks too. You can also follow me on social media. It is at @theofficialfng on Twitter and on Insta. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.